Hello and welcome to Coach Quip, episode 143. I'm Coach Chris.
Coach J-Ro.
Coach J-Ro! We've got Coach J-Ro back in the house. Coach Robyn is off this week. So this week we are talking about electrolytes. Everything electrolytes. This has been a question that I've gotten, that Coach Robyn has gotten a lot recently. And I think because it's getting warmer outside, our athletes are, asking all the questions and all the right questions about this topic. So we have the expert here to give us all the answers that we need. Starting off with, what are electrolytes?
What are electrolytes? Good question. They are substances, usually, good minerals. We hear about sodium, hear about potassium, and they work in the body. Our cells require these electrolytes. They have electric charges, and they kind of drive the ship on lots of different functions. So things like muscular contraction, balancing acidity, balancing hydration, right? So these are things that we need, and we get a lot of them in our diet, and sometimes we need a little bit more.
Yeah, I think people think about electrolytes when they're cramping, and I think that's been the big reason that a lot of people have been talking about it recently. I'm a child of the 90s, and so I think of Gatorade. That's my baseline for electrolytes is Gatorade. But there are so many other options out there of ways to get electrolytes, and we're going to talk about some of those. So, talked about what are electrolytes. What happens when your body is low on electrolytes?
Yeah. So generally, our body is really good at keeping a balance, just like with other nutrients, right? So, you lose a little, we find it elsewhere, so there's this constant pool going around, right? The problem really comes in when we may lose some faster than we can either cycle or replace, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can have issues like dehydration, which is associated with cramping in some instances, right? It's not the main cause of cramping. Cramping could be its own topic, to be completely honest. But one of the things we definitely want to think about is what can we do to prevent, cramping from happening, and that's staying hydrated well, using electrolytes when we need them, fueling with carbohydrates, all those good things. One of the biggest concerns, probably the most dangerous concern, because cramping sucks, right? It doesn't feel good, it ruins a race, it ruins training, but the worst thing really is hyponatremia, because that can be, I hate to say deadly, but look, you could end up in the hospital, right? And that's usually when you see people being carted off in the med tents. It's that hyponatremia and that usually happens in instances where we focus solely on water and almost overhydrate and oversaturate our body with so much water that the electrolyte concentration goes down, right? Obviously, if we don't drink enough to compensate for what we're losing, but that is often less likely than when over drinking solely with water.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we replace electrolytes then? We lose them through sweating, right? Are there other ways that we lose them?
Urine, we dehydrate in other ways. I would say urine losses, sweat losses are probably your major. And sweat losses are obviously greater if you are a heavier sweater, and in certain climates like heat, humidity, altitude. So those are main things. I think the first step in maintaining a good balance is to make sure you're eating well and staying hydrated just on a regular basis, right? This isn't, if you're training for a marathon and you're in good health, it's not the time to be like, I need to cut salt, right? Like, season your food, eat well, eat your fruits, eat your vegetables, because it's not just sodium, right? We want to keep the balance of the other minerals because those all work together, right? So making sure we're eating a balanced diet, hydrating well, and then obviously paying a particular attention to days we have like, a long run or a hard training session coming up. Yeah. We can think, and I like to think in terms of kind of threes, and I do this with fueling just in general with like carbohydrates and during training runs and as well, but we can think about like ahead, during, and post. So that pre-workout, if it's hot and humid and you don't do well in humidity, you've experienced like bad situations in the past, you're a heavy sweater and you're doing an indoor workout, let's get some hydration in before. So think 2 to 4 hours before, add in something like a sports drink, right? And that goes really well with a pre-workout meal, right?
Yep.
So offer that sports drink over water when you're having your little snack. That's a great way to kind of preload, right? During the workout, add in electrolytes. So again, breaking it into threes. Anytime you're going to do something that's an hour or more and it's going to be moderate or intense, right? Let's say you're doing a track workout and you know you're going to hit like 75, 80 minutes there. Let's add some electrolyte. If you're doing a long run at a lower intensity, but you're going to start hitting 90 minutes, 2 hours or more, make sure you're adding electrolytes. It's kind of a good way to just start thinking about when to add certain things in. And fortunately, that aligns really well with when to add in carbs. So drink mixes are a great way to get a little bit of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so to recap that part, because I think that was important information. So when we are doing moderately intense or very intense workouts, we want to make sure that we are adding in our electrolytes, and that can be for something about an hour long.
Yep.
And then if we're doing lower intensity but over an hour and a half and it's a little bit warmer, more humid outside, then we'd want those electrolytes there too.
For sure.
Okay.
Yep.
But for something under an hour, easy run, 45 minutes.
Yeah. If you're well hydrated to start, you should be good with water. I would make sure you have water with you. I would say anyone that knows you're a heavy sweater, it doesn't hurt to throw in a little electrolyte if you're doing something under as well. So throw a noon tablet in there, not a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. This is one that I think is interesting because you mentioned, bringing the water with you, and I know you have a strategy about sipping that we're going to talk about later on, but I feel like a lot of people will go out on their 45-minute, hour runs and not bring water with them. So what happens in that case? If this is a consistent pattern of, I'm just like a runner that doesn't carry water with me, what happens then?
Yeah. It's multifactorial. That's a big word.
Yeah, that's good.
I think first you're kind of building the habit of using your hydration system. So making sure you have it with you, even if it's going to be a quick short run, is just a good way to get into that habit. And if you end up, God forbid you end up running a little bit longer, getting lost, whatever happens, it turns out to be much hotter than you anticipated, and all of a sudden you need the water, you've started to create a hole that you have to dig yourself out of.
Yep.
You have to dig yourself out of the hole?
Yeah. You have to climb yourself.
Climb out of the hole.
Yeah. Either way, it's not a good place. Not a place where you want to be.
No, you don't want to be in the hole. So, yeah, exactly. So thinking just, even if you end up taking a few sips of it, it doesn't hurt to have it around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So the rule of three, the third of the rule of three, you think about after your workout. So particularly, and this is a good way to kind of see how much fluid you've been drinking. If you've been drinking enough, is doing kind of a weigh in and weigh after. And if you see a significant change, then we need to adjust how much fluid you're actually taking in. But you do also want to replace what's been lost. So that's water loss. This is not like weight loss. So for every pound you're losing, you want to replace that with about 16 to 24 ounces. You can think 20 for an even number. Drink it slowly, don't chug it. That doesn't do any favors, even though you might want to after a hot run, but you will feel the need less to chug quickly if you've been hydrating well throughout the run as well. So yeah.
Okay, that's super helpful. I think that I know this is a complicated question because I'm sure it's deeply personal, as most nutrition things are. But how many electrolytes are we looking at needing?
Yeah,
for an average person.
Yeah, in that it is a very personal thing, I guess, individual thing.
Yeah.
So there's a recommendation, and it's about 300, and I would say the upper end being 700, right, milligrams of sodium per liter of water.
I was like, ounces? That's so much.
Milligrams of sodium, for sure. Yeah, good luck drinking that much. Yeah. But that has been found to replace the average loss that we see. And also be, so when you start putting things into water, you create, different kind of osmolalities and concentrations that if they're really out of whack with our blood, then it starts to create issues and more gut distress, right? So I know there's a lot of like higher sodium things out there, but the recommended continues to be about 300, lower end for normal sweaters, and then 700 for heavier sweaters.
Okay, the top question that I've gotten recently, as it's gotten hotter outside and people are ramping up their training, Chicago Marathon training is starting today, I think. So, do athletes need electrolytes outside of training? You mentioned like that little bit before, if we're having the sports drink and our pre-workout meal, but on the days that they're not training, on off days or in rest period, what should our electrolyte thoughts be at that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think if you're following your hydration protocol pretty well, you can kind of go about the rest of your nutrition, just trying to eat well, balanced diet again. Make sure you're eating a variety of fruits, vegetables. These all have those minerals, right? Grains, whole grains, nuts. These are all going to have some of those minerals too. And then season your food. Again, like don't skimp on, salt in the good way, right? But if you, as Coach Chris might say, eat kind of like an asshole, then you might want to find ways to supplement certain things, right?
Right.
And that's where maybe it acts more like a supplement than the main source of these electrolytes.
Okay. And then in the summertime, it obviously makes sense because I think people associate heavy sweating with taking the electrolytes. What about in the winter months? Is that something that we should be thinking about too?
Yeah. I mean, we still sweat in the winter, right?
I guess so. It feels different, right? Like
it does feel different.
If you're running outside or riding outside, like maybe riding, I notice it more because of the gear that I'm wearing. But running outside, yeah, I think people forget that they sweat in the winter.
Yeah. I'd say you're probably going to experience less of the extremes.
Yeah.
So obviously less heat, humidity. But if you are doing indoor stuff or long work, you can keep to the lower end of that range, right? So closer to maybe like 300 to 500 milligrams, which is pretty typical of what you find in an average sports drink anyway. And make sure that we're getting some of that because, we are still losing electrolytes.
Even if we don't notice.
We don't notice as much. Swimmers, right? Swimmers,
right.
You don't realize you're sweating, but you're losing some of that anyway. So you don't really think about it, but having a sports drink by the poolside is super important.
Yeah. Is it possible to overdo it on electrolytes?
That's a good question. You will. So there's. I will say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm gonna say yeah. There's definitely right now no known benefit to going high, right? And not like extreme, not like hyponatremia or anything like that, but you can experience uncomfortable symptoms. So let's say you're on a really good training run, and you're doing a little more sodium than you might need. All of a sudden, like your body has to sort of pull water to take care of the sodium. Your gut can create GI distress. Or just even like really annoying is like your body wants to get rid of the extra because we're not sweating enough of it out and we need to keep that balance. You're gonna have to take like 3 pee breaks during the run, right? So I don't like stopping unless I need to in a run. I mean, I don't mind a good like red light, but if I'm like in the middle of an interval,
right,
I don't have to stop because I have to go to the bathroom or feel that full bladder, right?
Right. Yeah. A horrible feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so for electrolytes, more is more. There is a limit as to what we should be targeting.
For sure.
All right, so you said the 3 different areas of fueling for electrolytes before, during, and after our training. Let's go through a sample plan.
Yeah.
So a sample plan for an average athlete, a typical athlete. We don't have to assign super numbers to this, but some of the ways that people might be looking at getting electrolytes or using them and timing. What does that look like? And like before, I have speed work this afternoon.
Whoa.
What should I be thinking about?
All right. I think ahead of time, we want to think about how much fluid we'll need. So a really good way to do that is, just the sweat rate test, right? And that just sets a baseline of fluid, and from there we can add electrolytes to that, right? So weigh in before the workout, weigh in afterwards, take into account any losses, and all of a sudden you have an idea of, under those conditions and that intensity, how much fluid you lose. So it's a good idea to kind of do that for different types. And in general, with most types of like long distance marathon training, you have your tempo runs, you got your speed workouts, you got your long runs, so you can kind of figure out what the needs are for different situations there.
When we're doing that, are we thinking about, am I weighing myself in my sweaty, wet clothes, or is this like you're in the privacy of your own home doing a no clothes weigh-in before and after?
Yeah, I would do it nude.
Yep.
Yeah, so towel off afterwards. It's long hair gathers a lot of sweat, so you kind of try to squeeze that out. So there is always going to be room for error, but it'll give you a good guide of if you lose a lot of fluid versus a little bit of fluid.
Okay, makes sense. Just making sure everybody's on the same page here.
Squeeze, leave the sweaty clothes aside.
Okay.
And then, before your workout, you do want to think 2 to 5 hours ahead of time. And maybe this is, if you're doing a nighttime workout, this is your lunch or maybe the snack prior, right? Throw in a little sports drink, something like a Gatorade. But like, there are a ton of different options out there now. So one that, tastes good to you, sits well with you. I think finding that right drink is important. So adding those electrolytes there. And that'll help. So adding that sodium to that drink will help just like retain fluid. It's almost like preloading, but also making sure we can retain some fluid even ahead of the workout. Salty snacks are also an option too. So if you're just like, sports drinks, don't really like them, and you prefer to use something like salt tabs in your workouts, you can do salty snacks. Again, season your food. That's still that sodium, right? And that's the most important one we're looking at because that's the one we lose the most in our sweat.
So I've had my pre-snack. I've been eating and hydrating well for the last many months. Very good.
Not like an asshole.
So now I'm putting on my shoes. I'm ready to go hit that workout. What am I thinking about now?
Yeah. So you're putting on your shoes. You're going to grab your nutrition. So we've calculated what carbs you might need for this particular workout, and you've mixed up your drink. So again, utilize the fluid that you'll need based on your sweat rate, and make sure you have enough of that. And the goal is not really to like replace it 1-to-1. Think like 60 to 70% of what you might lose in that test. You want to avoid drinking so much, particularly water, that you don't come back after the workout weighing more than you started.
Right.
Because that is kind of like, all right, that habit can lead to situations like hyponatremia and stuff, right? So making sure that we're finding that right balance for fluid. It's pretty hard to do, but, depending on your pace and what actually happens out there, it can happen. And then during the run, you've got your mix, you've added your electrolytes somewhere in that 300 to 700 milligram range per liter. Lower end again for lighter sweaters, higher end for heavier sweaters. And you want to take sips, I'd say every 10 to 20 minutes. And a great tip is to just set your alarm if you have trouble just kind of keeping track of time. And if you want to make sure you're hydrating enough, if you're a heavier sweater, just drink a little more frequently, think 10 minutes. And if you're a lighter sweater, think 20 minutes.
Yeah, and you had mentioned carbohydrates. So I'm putting on my shoes, I got my carbs, I got my electrolytes. So this is like the third time that you mentioned this, and I just want to make sure that we're really clear about this. So when we are fueling in our workout, we cannot just be using electrolytes, right?
Yeah, electrolytes do not serve as fuel.
Electrolytes do not serve as fuel. Just to clear it up for everybody, like they're an important addition to it, right? And it's essential for hydration and for health, but it's not going to fuel us through and power us through our training.
No. And actually, they work together to keep you fueled and keep you hydrated, right? So it's almost like, hey, let's tackle that from two sides, right?
Yeah. So we cannot be doing our 2-hour, long ride and just be using noon tabs.
No.
Bad disaster.
That would be a bad time.
Okay.
Unless you like to ride really slow and take the train home. But I had a bad experience in the blue line. So.
Yeah. Do you like to bonk? This might be the workout plan for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so I have sipped throughout my workout. I used my carb drink. I used my electrolytes. Feeling good. How do I keep that good feeling rolling after my workout?
Yeah, you want to keep that going, and then you want to like roll right into recovery, right? So first thing, obviously fuel again, but let's rehydrate. So after the workout, hop on a scale. Most of us have a sense of what we normally weigh, right? And then for every pound you have lost, you want to replenish that with about 16 to 24 ounces. The goal is to avoid losing more than 2% of your body weight. And obviously, like we said, we don't want to be way more than we started. So that's the range we want to stay within, and then replenish anything that you have lost.
So for that 16 to 24% 16 to 24 ounces that we're replenishing with afterwards, we're talking about electrolytes in there as well, or just water at this point?
Yeah, you can use water there, it doesn't hurt to add in a little bit of electrolyte there, but I think water would be just fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have talked about before, during, and after how to add those electrolytes in. Let's just move to the sort of catch-all. Any general tips that you have for athletes in thinking about electrolytes, using them, things we should be aware of? Any additional nuggets of wisdom from Coach J-Ro?
So many nuggets. Not the chicken.
A Happy Meal in there.
I think the first rule of thumb really is to think about your event. If you're training for something, we have something we're, really aiming for, something that's important to us. We got to practice what we're doing for that race in training, right? So, thinking about the products you want to use, thinking about the modalities, the timing, those are really important. So the amount of the stuff might change a little bit based on, conditions or whatnot, but you want to practice the little things like timing, getting things ready, having certain foods, knowing what foods and drinks you can trust and rely on, right, is super important.
Or even how you carry them, right? Like, so if you plan on carrying your own fuel for an event and you're going to have a vest with a bladder on it, you got to put in reps with that bladder on because it might chafe in certain places, or it might be really uncomfortable, or you might have a hard time, getting it in while running. And so those are all things that you want to practice as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some, everything from like wearing the belt and just dropping bottles all over the place. Handhelds, leak, like anything can happen, right? So you definitely want to find what system feels most comfortable for you, how much fluid it can hold based on how much fluid you need. And then from there, think about, what is the opportunity for me to replenish this? What's that going to look like in training and then the race? All super important, yeah.
What about when it's super hot out, strategies for getting those electrolytes in?
Yeah.
Because I think there are a few things that are more disgusting than drinking warm liquid that's not supposed to be warm from my bottle on a ride.
Yeah.
Like just sipping hot water.
Oh, delicious, like tea.
So gross.
Yeah.
That is not tea. So strategies that you have around that.
I actually can't even, I don't even like warm water. So once it gets warm, I'm struggling, right?
But you need those electrolytes.
You do. So flavor, I think a little bit of salt, actually helps palatability, make it palatable.
Yep.
But temperature is important too, and it can also help cool your body down if it is super hot. So I love taking my either bladder, flask, or even water bottles and filling it halfway, throw it in the freezer overnight, then top it off in the morning, and then you get a nice cool drink. As it defrosts, it continues to stay cool for the most part. At some point, you'll probably get to a point where it's melted depending on the temperature, but it's a good way to kind of keep things cool a little bit longer. I'm thinking about that pre-hydration, I guess. How do I know I'm pre-hydrated? I followed your rules, but how do I really know? So you want to think about just a comfortably full feeling in your stomach. So you're not sloshing around fluid.
The worst.
It's the
worst. If anybody has ever had this happen, you know that this is not a pleasant feeling. To me, it is the equivalent of if you're standing in a pool and you just slap your hands on the top of the water. I've definitely done an Ironman race where it just felt like I had little baby hands just slapping. That was not comfortably full.
No. And it's inside of you. That baby's slapping water
horrible.
inside of you.
Horrible feeling. Horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so comfortably full, which is different than that.
Yeah. And that, drinking slowly, pacing it, chugging water can lead to that sloshing, right? You're not giving that
guilty
time to empty the fluids and go where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
So really think about that, getting that comfortably full stomach by slowly sipping these things that we talked about.
That's such a good point, though, because like you said earlier, the desire might be to chug after a hot run or something like that, but you can't pre-hydrate in one quick gulp either, right? So I often find that I will be way behind on my hydration and just be I've got to get this bottle down before I go to bed, which is a horrible idea. Don't do that. Or any other time of the day of putting down 28 to 32 ounces in 2 minutes.
Yeah. It's a lot of volume.
It's a lot of slapping.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to stretch that out over time, and it kind of doesn't matter if it's before, during, or after. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Frequent sips will always win.
Yep. Okay, so my question is, are there electrolytes in coffee?
Oh, I don't think caffeine's an electrolyte, but
yeah.
Is that what we're drinking?
Just checking. Just curious minds want to know.
There's some good antioxidants, right?
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Many health benefits.
Caffeine can be, a performance enhancer in other ways.
Yeah. So I like these other tips that you have also in terms of like training and making sure that you can access your electrolytes. So one thing that you had mentioned is having loops set up. So this is kind of just a good general training strategy of having your nutrition, your hydration. You have a restroom there, maybe if it's your house, or if it's your car, you can always come back to it. And setting up your training so that you can consistently get that fuel in if you're not a person that can carry it all with you, or if the training is something like trails or something, right? I love that strategy. And then also, you had mentioned carrying cash or a credit card with you.
Emergencies.
So talk about that one.
Yeah. Sometimes you just get stuck, right? Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, like very few Ironman training people have gone through a long ride without having to make an emergency stop at a gas station for a Coca-Cola or a sports drink or something, 100%. Right?
Yeah.
So always
especially
a good idea.
On the bike.
Especially on the bike. And it's I feel like it sneaks up on you. And then it's bad news.
It's very bad news. There's two things I always carry with me on the bike, and it doesn't matter how long I'm going, how far I'm going, I will always have my ID, a train card, I guess that's three things, and a credit card.
Yep. Okay, so tons of nuggets in this one, lots of great tips about how to use electrolytes before, during, and after, a couple of ranges for you to think about. So you mentioned there are many products, right? We're all familiar with Gatorade and Noon. What are some other products, and this is not an endorsement, but just things that you've seen that people might want to look at, because I think now's the time to experiment, right, to see what works. So if someone is looking for a way to take in electrolytes during training, what are a couple of ways that you would suggest?
Yeah, great question. So there's a ton of products for sure. I would definitely look at the product your event will have, because that is good to just lean on and make sure that it's there in ample supply, and you don't have to carry as much depending on how often it's available. But yeah, in addition to Gatorade and Noon, I think Tailwind is a great product that I've personally been using. Not an endorsement, but feel free to sponsor me. No, I've lost track. Oh, Scratch. Scratch Hydration does a great job as well. And there's others like Gnarly, Mix. But I would say you can find and try, there's Liquid IV, things like that. But I would always, I guess, the rule of thumb, and maybe this is a good takeaway, is whatever product you decide to, you can go to Walmart and get electrolytes there, right? Is just check how much is in a serving, what that serving looks like in terms of the fluid, right? Yeah. Because I was just looking at one today from Walmart, and it had 200 milligrams, a little bit under, right? So maybe that's your kind of everyday electrolyte source if you want a little extra boost. So you want to think, close to that 300 to 700, right, range. And most of the sport ones will be formulated to hit that bill. Yep, and then you mentioned tabs as well. Tabs, tablets. Yeah, and that's something else to think about. Like, if you're doing a longer event, a tab can be easier to carry than having a scoop powder, right? Yeah. But some of these do come in individual packs of powders, so they're really easy to flip into a bottle. Some folks will do, there's salt chews, salt capsules, right? Those ones you just have to make sure you're drinking water with them. Right. Otherwise, all of a sudden you have like a little sodium bomb in your belly and it doesn't do what it needs to do. Right? Bubble guts. Yeah. No good. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but find what works for you. We have come a long way from me tearing open a McDonald's salt packet and licking it off my palm when I was first starting training. So this also works, though. This also works. That's the low budget way of getting in some electrolytes in a pinch, right? Maybe not the daily way to do it, but... Yeah, maybe it is. It's not as tasty as some of these other products, though. Yeah, true. All right, final nugget of wisdom about electrolytes for all of our listeners. Yeah, treat it like a part of your nutrition plan. So be sure to include that as you're working out your calories and carbs and all your intake. Think about what that fluid and electrolyte should look like for both your training runs as well as your event. Excellent. Yeah. Coach J-Ro, always good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us again, talking about electrolytes. If you are struggling with electrolytes or any piece of your nutrition, hydration plan, we've got Coach J-Ro here. And not to put you out there, but putting you out there, we have a great resource right here at Edge for all of you to use. So if you have questions or want to know more about what J-Ro can offer in terms of your training and strategies, hit her up. Yeah. All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip, original music performed by Ment. Follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.